This is an add-on edit. There is no musical introduction. I do hope you find this session thought-provoking and informative, but I did not believe this session required a musical introduction. Good morning. Pastor John Davis, Amityville Community Church. Let's ask the Lord to bless our time. Father God, we ask you for wisdom, grace, mercy, and courage. We have events that have caused great unrest in our nation, but we ask you to give us wisdom, discernment, boldness, and how to respond and how to go forward in this. We ask that you would raise up people who take a stand for justice, just as you, Jesus, took a stand for us. In Jesus' name, amen. I do want to begin by stating this. If anyone professes to be a believer in Jesus, we realize that one of the great messages of the cross of Jesus is that Jesus took a stand for us. Jesus took a stand for us. The Aubrey family in Atlanta, the Floyd family now, and I say Atlanta, but I believe it's Brunswick, Georgia. And I hope I'm saying the name right, Aubrey, the Floyd family, and so many other families. We don't want to just read it in the newspaper anymore. We want to demonstrate the Christ-like ethic of being a voice for the voiceless, to represent those who can no longer represent themselves. Of course, we want to keep the Floyd family and so many other families in prayer. No one can understand the devastation when you are going about your business in the ordinary fashion with no harm to anyone in mind, and your life brutally comes to an end. But unfortunately, and I'm going to read a quote by Frederick Douglass. This is why I say unfortunately. Frederick Douglass says, "Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of the injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them." Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of the injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them. In our nation now, this is being tested. You can see that certain offices, would never say all offices, but certain offices, certain law enforcement officials are definitely making a point. They're making a point. They're making a point. They're saying that we are going to do what we're going to do, and what will you do about it? Protesting is, I believe, a viable means of voicing our concerns, our dissent, but we need to understand that there are times when we have to take more specific and more powerful measures. But I want you to think about that Frederick Douglass quote. He's saying you have to teach people that there's a limit. Charles Bukowski, gentlemen, I don't want to go into his background, but he says, this is what he says: "I guess the only time most people think about injustice is when it happens to them." Hopefully that is not true. Of course, Jesus says, "Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you." People quote that. So what will we do now? What will we do now? Martin Luther King says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Will I stand idly by when another son or another daughter? And of course, the quote that I had on my session yesterday from Martin Niemöller. "First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. They came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. They came for me, but there was no one left to speak for me. I'm going to read some names to you, and I would suggest that you take a moment to look them up, and you're going to hear these names. First of all, how many of you remember Eric Garner, who was choked to death in Staten Island, New York? Then we have Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. There's a gentleman, Akai Gurley, from New York, Tamir Rice, Eric Harris. And some of you may know these names if you follow the news. Walter Scott, William Chapman II, Jeremy McDowell, Jamar Clark, Alton Sterling, Terrence Crutcher, Philando Castile, Sam Dubois, Freddie Gray. Look these names up. Go on the internet and search. And let us not forget the shooting of the women, the shooting of the congregants in South Carolina in the church. And yet I fear that we have not got the point yet. So in saying this, I believe the solution is simple. I do believe this solution is quite simple. I do not believe the solution has to do with violence. Several years ago, a man knelt down in the NFL, Colin Kaepernick, about this very issue. He knelt down, whether people agreed with his stance or not. He knelt down because of the brutality that was being inflicted upon African American youth in a disproportionate measure. And when you think of this, you remember Rodney King. So he knelt down, and sadly, no athlete stood with him. No. There comes a place where we must realize that sacrifices must be made, as you could see by the title. Sacrifices must be made. I want to just say this, as you could see, I'm not going to spend much time. This will continue to go on. It will continue to go on. It will continue to go on. It will continue to go on until we make it clear. And when I say we, I am not talking about African Americans. I'm talking about any human being that has a conscience about injustice. That this will stop when we take the means to make it stop. I believe at least one step. I would not say the following is complete. But I used to speak to people at my workplace about cutting off their NFL packages. Once the NFL barred Colin Kaepernick, I threw out all my jerseys. I have not watched a football game since that time. I have no football package anymore. Let me say this. I was amazed at how many African American men, and I'm saying this, would not give up football. Now we're going to talk about this, and we're going to get incensed. We're going to be passionate, and we're going to cry about injustice. But then we're going to turn on the Giants game. We're going to turn on the Dallas Cowboy game. The hypocrisy must stop. Now, if you say you do not care, that's another matter. But let us not fall into the complacency of thinking that speaking around a coffee table, speaking at Starbucks, speaking over a lunch with passion about this equals action. That is foolishness. We're deceiving ourselves. Talking about it is a way that we absolve ourselves of our personal responsibility. I know that when I gave up all my jerseys, it may or may not make a difference. But when 5 million do it and 10 million do it, what frightens me more, I will be quite honest, what frightens me more is not the fact that this brutality goes on. What frightens me more is that African Americans and human beings in this country, but I'm speaking right now specifically to the African American community. I would never say that injustice is limited to us, and I realize and thank you for the other Americans who've joined in the protests. But amazes me that giving up a game has become so, it seems to be so, we're so in bondage to it that the injustices will continue. I remember speaking to individuals at my workplace. So unless we show that we are willing to make a small sacrifice, of course, we must have forgotten the grandmothers and the 9-year-old girls who stood up in civil rights in the 50s and 60s with German shepherds and hoses, spraying them down with enormous water pressure. The nightsticks, grandmothers and young girls, and men cannot give up a game. Men cannot give up a game. Men cannot give up a game. Surely we cannot ask anyone to respect us as a people if we cannot respect ourselves enough to lay aside worldly amusement and earthly entertainment in the name of our young men. And I understand what some are saying right now. They're saying, well, my son has a scholarship. My son. All I can say is, and I wish no harm on anybody, but understand, just as Mr. Bukowski said, but when that injustice happens, do we think that we are immune? Let's understand this. Let's understand this. Sacrifices must be made to communicate this. As long as each of us seek to protect our position and station in life, this will continue to transpire. How many of you remember just not too long ago? And it was on the news, Jay-Z, he's going to be part of the NFL. What has happened? What has happened? This is no slant to Mr. Jay-Z, but what has happened? The brutality continues. Long gone are the days of Muhammad Ali losing his career to make a stance. Long gone are the days of John Carlos and Tommy Smith raising their hand on an Olympic stand, giving up how much money and endorsements, but saying that they will not sit silently by while brutality occurs in the streets. Let me say this. Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I know what some of you are saying. Pastor John, I'm just making a point. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out for yourself. The point is, they stood up for people, even when people were not willing to stand up for themselves. Again, imagine if all individuals, African American and Caucasian, who really thought these crimes were an injustice. Imagine if we all gave up all sporting paraphernalia, all sporting events, didn't attend them. You know there would be a backlash. You know there would be attention given. But right now we are going quietly like a lamb to the slaughter. Yes. So all I can do is, I had mentioned to some friends about a date. We don't need a date. Just pass this little sermonette around and tell people to start canceling. Or just, you know what, put your cable on all the way down. Put it all the way down to the bare minimum. See what happens. We have reached, I fear, new levels of selfishness, new levels of individualism. So this is just one man's attempt. Many of us will rationalize, no, that's not going to do anything. Oh, no, we know it will. We just don't want to give it up. We just don't want to give up our little personal convenience. No one's asking you to give up food and water, a game. We sit in outrage, and we do. We sit in outrage. I say protesting, while a viable means, the government loves when we protest, because we protest and then we go silently away. But imagine the economic backlash. And you have to pass this on quickly. Some of you know how to download this. Download it, because YouTube may very well take this down. They may say that I'm undermining our economy. They may say that. They may say I'm undermining the economy. Although our nation, the suffrage movement with the ladies, civil rights, we realize our country has been built on revolution, the American Revolution. Why would someone think that this is undermining anything? But we realize that when certain powers, when certain structures of tyranny, because that's all you could say about a man putting his knee, a man with a badge putting his knee on an unarmed man and just talking casually as though he was carrying a bag of groceries. It's tyranny. It's tyranny. It's tyranny. We need to take stances. If you know how to download this, great. Pass this on. We have the power now to pass this on in a way that millions, and just start canceling it today. Cancel them today. Cancel them today. Cancel them. Cancel your sports packages. Bring your cable down to basic. Most of us spend time on the phone anyway. But the economic, don't buy any more jerseys of any sport. NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, just stop. Let's see what will happen. If there's another alternative, I know there was something passed around about one day, and I think that's a wonderful start. But we realize that one day we'll spend money on Tuesday and then on Thursday, and so the country won't feel that economic backlash. I submit this to you. Listen to it. I'm saying this now. I'm speaking to the African American men. If you can't give it up, shame on you. Shame on you. That could be your son, my son. That could be your daughter, my daughter. Shame on you. Oh, yes, I'm saying it. A game. We're talking about a game. What sacrifices? Again, I remind us, remember, grandmothers sitting in churches during the 50s and the 60s, churches being bombed, them being beat with nightsticks, little girls. Ruby Bridges, you see that famous painting where she's walking with marshals to make a statement. They walk into a church and they shoot in South Carolina. They shoot the prayer meeting, the Bible study congregants. What will it take to turn off the game? What will it take? I don't want to belabor the point. I will just repeat those quotes again. I'll repeat those quotes. Charles Bukowski. I guess the only time most people think about injustice is when it happens to them. I hope that is not true. I hope we have not reduced ourselves to the talk show mentality where you see people on a talk show and they banter about and they get enraged. They're volatile and then nothing happens. Let's go get a cup of coffee. Let's go get yes. I cannot reduce this. I'm not here to salve anybody's conscience. I've given mine up already. I've gone 2 years. 2 years, whatever it was. Yes. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice. Don't you want people to stand up for you if something happens to your son or daughter? How many of us are watching the game? And yet some of us even have family members who've been imprisoned unjustly, have been stopped by police in traffic stops unjustly. Fortunately, it did not end in a tragedy such as this. But it will continue to go on, and we may be the victims of this brutality and violence. There it is. Everybody, give up all your sporting packages. Buy no paraphernalia regarding sports. Just don't buy it. Do it now. Now. I see that there may be other solutions, but let's not get caught up. Let's not deceive ourselves. Those who don't want to give it up won't give it up, and they'll talk you out of giving it up. Understand that. For some, this is such an addiction. They will allow, and understand this, and I mean this, please take it in the right context. When we're addicted to something, don't we even give up our families? How many in gambling have lost their homes and their families, but they won't give it up? So please understand, there is a mindset when someone is addicted to a sport, when someone is addicted to a substance, they are willing to lose their family. They're willing to lose their jobs. They're willing to lose their homes. They're willing to lose their dignity. And I don't say that as an affront. I'm saying it as a reality. An addiction is powerful. And they'll convince you that you shouldn't give it up because it's not going to do anything. Don't fall for that insanity. Don't fall for that insanity. Don't fall for that insanity. Make sure that you keep a clear mind and think about it rationally. If every person who felt this was an injustice gave up spending money on anything related to sports in America, imagine the economic fallout. Imagine it. Now, right now it's been done, but cancel it. Cancel those cable packages. Oh, yes. Start now. Start now. This is going to go up in a few minutes. I'm going to be loading this up. And I, of course, have a copy, and I'll find a way to get you a copy if you need to pass it on. I'll find a way to get it to you, whether it's CD, whether it's another download. If you want to pass this on, I'll get it to you because this may be taken down. Oh, yes. You could see, some of you have seen other videos that have been taken down because it's clear now that while in our country we will talk about freedom being distorted, freedom being restricted in other nations, we could see here it's happening as well. Oh, yes. Yes, I want to be careful now. I don't want to say too much more. Not about that, but we understand that our country was built on what? Revolution. This is not violent. Notice I've not encouraged any violence at all. Simple economic. And that's, by the way, those protests of the civil rights movement, they were accompanied by boycotting. When you boycott, people listen. People listen. See, they want us to ride on the back of the bus, but if you just don't ride the bus, they feel it. They feel it when 20,000 are no longer riding the buses in Montgomery, whatever the number is. So we want you to ride, but we want you to ride our way and sit where we tell you. Well, we say we're not going to ride. And now they're upset. So let's show that we're not going to ride anymore. We're not going to ride anymore. We're not going to ride anymore. Let's see. Let's see who's willing. Oh, yes. And again, I just say, for those, and I mean this, to African American men who continue to watch and entertain themselves at the expense, I'm saying it, at the expense. We can justify and rationalize. Oh, Pastor John, you said that sacrifices must be made. A game. And I say the game because it was that gentleman Kaepernick, whether you like him or not, he was taking a stand. Pass this out. Pass this out. Today, people could call up there. I'm canceling my cable package right now. Just do it today. Oh, yes. And don't let the media fool you. Let me tell you what will happen. I know this well. I've lived in America. The media is going to not make much of it. You have to be willing to hold out. You have to be willing to hold out. They're not going to cave in 2 weeks. Some of us think the minute we do something, if there's not an immediate response, do you realize how many years that civil rights movement went on? Years? How many years it took? So we're going to give it up for 3 months and we think there's going to be a result? Do we think we're going to reverse this tide of hatred and brutality this quickly in our nation? Some of us, we're deluded. Oh, I gave up my football for a season. Oh, boy, that was big. And you know what? I compassionately say it is big for some of us. Some of us, watching men play a game is huge. It's huge. I once was a fan, but I knew when that gentleman knelt down, I knew. Notice I've said nothing about our flag. Now, I'm not asking anybody to disrespect the flag because people will distort. I'm equipping you now. What I'm doing is I'm coaching you. I'm equipping you to interpret events properly. People will try to distort what's going on. They're going to tell you, oh, when you do this, you're going to hurt the jobs of other African Americans. That's what they're going to tell you. You're going to put other athletes. I think we all know in our right mind, many athletes have enough money to live for the next 44 millennium. Don't let people distort this. I'm not going to answer every response, but on this YouTube, you can make a comment. I'm sure I'll get some comments. But let me just say, pass this on. This is how you stop this. Everybody give up their packages. Give it up. Don't buy it. Don't buy it. I know some of you are going to watch on the phone. Oh, I see you're watching on the phone. Spend no money on your cable. Buy no paraphernalia related to major professional sports. Watch what happens. And then if you start doing it in the college level, oh yes. Oh yes. And by the way, don't think for a moment, because they'll tell you in college, oh, the money. Look at how much college costs. And look at how much money is brought in sports. Where's that money going? Don't let them fool you. Don't let individuals fool you. These college sports brings in millions of dollars, and you as a parent are still paying $45,000 to $50,000 a year. Don't let them make you think that all that money is going into education. Don't let them make you think that. This is one man's attempt to bring light to this. I have a letter that I wrote last year sometime. If anybody's interested in that, that's fine. But I'm hoping that we have now reached a place of emotional maturity, of intellectual awareness, and of social consciousness that as individuals we're saying no more. If we each take this stance, and I'm going to ask that let's not fall into the trap of trying to do 85 things at once. This is something we can do individually today. We don't need to organize a plan. As I said, you could pass this out between passing this link and texting it, and millions of people can have it in a week, if not a day. You be blessed. To the Floyd family, to the Arbery family, to all these families, my deepest condolences, my greatest sympathies, and I hope that you could hear. The silence of major sports on behalf of your children, your brothers and sisters. I hope you could hear the silence. I hope you can hear the emptiness of the stands, so you would know that you're not alone. Let us all remember, we don't want to think about injustice only when it happens to us. We do not want to think about injustice only when it happens to us. We want to think about injustice so when something happens to us, we will not have to be isolated and deserted. Amen.